Is 9:00. Welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen. If you are tuning in right now, let me know where you're tuning in from. It's always a kick to see where our audience is tuning in from. We have a fantastic guest all the way from Austin, Texas. But before I bring him onto the show, I will bring on my co-host, who is Rahim Osman. How are you, Rahim?
Hi, good. Good evening, Azif and Darash. Good
Nice
to
to
see you
have you
guys
back on
again.
the show. Yeah, nice to see you. How have you been?
Very busy. In fact, I was rushing from the office just now. I had a few meetings, and luckily the jam wasn't that bad. That's why I still could make it just like 10 minutes before the show starts.
I can imagine. Yeah, I drove to the office as well, and traffic is getting back to
Yeah,
pre-COVID levels,
precisely. Yeah,
which is a
precisely.
shame. Which is a shame. But the office is still quiet for us. We're still in four separate teams A, B, C, D. So at any one time, only 25% of the workforce is in the office.
Uh,
Um, we're starting teams A, B next week. And then we're slowly getting back people into the office. How about for your company? Are your people working from home, or do you back in your office?
Right now, mostly still at home, still working remotely. Right now, we just emphasize like having two or three people in the office to make sure that if there's any urgent, urgent visits by some of these people, especially when it comes to deliveries, some of these, communication mails or something
Right,
like that, then we have to make sure that somebody in office to check those mails and deliver to the respective people.
right.
Yeah.
So it's slowly getting back to normal, with everyone getting busy again. But like I said, we have a fantastic guest today on this episode, which we call the story episode. So we'll bring on a storyteller here, and his name is Doug Thompson. How are you, Doug?
I am well, thank you very much. And talking about traffic brings me right to home. It's the same over here.
So thank you. I know it's really early in the morning of where you are, so thank you so much for accommodating us at this time.
I look better in the morning than I do in the evening, so you've got you got my pretty face on right
I've
now.
got the better, I got the better deal out of this. It is 9:05 p.m. here in Malaysia, so I guess it's 7:05 there in Austin, Texas,
That's
uh,
correct.
and it's 9 where you are, Rahim, also in Kuala Lumpur.
Yes.
So again, wonderful to have you on board, and you are known as a storyteller, tech explainer. You have your own podcast called Doug Thompson, and I know you work for a tech company now.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you started in the industry, and where you are right now.
Sure. My entire career I've been in sort of technology sales. I started out working on copiers out of college because it was in the area I grew up in East Texas. If you weren't in the oil business, everything was sort of up and down with the way the oil business was. And when I started school, there were like three jobs for every person that graduated with a degree in electronics. And then by the time I graduated, there were three people for every job. So that was life. It sort of went in cycles. So I started out working on copiers, and I did that for about almost 20 years, I guess, for a local dealer, and then the manufacturer was Panasonic at the time. And then I along the lines, computers started to come out, networking. I had coaxial cable running through my house, and it drove my wife crazy when we first started, to do the 10 base 2 stuff that we had. But I just really loved technology. I really it excited me. I was always curious about it. So I spent more time and money building PCs, and I would buy the components to do that. I got really excited when hard drives got down less than $1 a meg. That's ancient times, the Bill Gates, anybody will ever need over 740K of RAM. So I was, I was just a nerd. I'd put those things together, and then an opportunity came to work for Microsoft. It was a contracting gig. It was a sort of a side hustle of mine. I had a little consulting business in addition to working at Microsoft, where I'd help local companies, small companies with their networks and PCs. And there was I was an MCT, so a certified trainer, and an opportunity came up to do Microsoft at the time. They had system builders, which were the little small mom and pop shops building the white box PCs. That was back before the Dells and HPs and everybody. Right now you can't find these mom and pop shops anymore, at least in the U.S. And it was around Windows Millennium, Windows Me, and Windows 2000. And it was a road show, so we would get to go in front of the audiences. And this was sort of the first inkling I had of my storytelling ability, because after we went through the training class, they called me and said, look, you were the best person there because you can really relate to the audience. You tell a good story. And a few months, anyway, I went through, did that. A few months later, they called me, hey, we got a job here. And I was happy doing what I was doing, but I've never turned down the opportunity to talk. I don't ever look back and say, man, I wish I would have taken that conversation. And so I got a job working for Microsoft about the time Windows XP was coming out. And, it's there. That was the pre-sales engineering type thing where we were working with the OEMs to get Windows and stuff. I worked on early devices like pocket PCs, if you remember those. I worked with, before the phone, we worked with tablets. And, I started with the tablets and they weighed 8 pounds and had a 20-minute battery life, well before the iPad. And so then, I just did that. I liked being in front of the customer. The worst job I ever had was where I was internally facing, and I struggled at that. So I've got to be out talking to people, got to be out talking to customers, because at the end of the day, and this is sort of my motto for anytime I give a talk or anything like that, if I can change one person's life, if I can get them to think a little bit differently, then I've done my job. And I can't do that internally. For me, I mean, there's some people that can. I have to be out talking to customers and stuff because I get such wonderful stories from them, stories of success, stories of failure, stories of struggle. Like you talk about your nephew with the chicken and rice thing, the struggle that you go through, and ultimately it's the hero's journey. So I really fell in love with that. And then but I still didn't understand that I was a storyteller. I didn't think what I was doing was anything unique. As a lot of people are that are very gifted or very good at what they do, they don't necessarily think it's unique. They think everybody can do that. And we were interviewing for a role similar to mine, and we went through like 100 candidates. We interviewed probably 50 through this whole thing. And the boss said, look, I need another you. And I said, what do you mean? I need somebody that can go ahead and tell a story to a customer. Because now with technology, you're not selling to the fellow nerd. You're selling to the CMO. You're selling to somebody that's got a budget. They don't really give a crap about what the technology is. They just wanted to solve a problem, and they wanted to do it effectively and quickly. They want technology to fade in the background. So how do you go ahead and tell that story? How do you relate to them living their life? And that's where I came up with the word tech-splaining, because there was a lot of people, sort of a play on words from the old mansplaining that comes where we're trying to explain something to my wife or something. But a lot of very brilliant people, they get down in the ones and zeros, and they get down and they totally lose their audience, and they're just not that successful at it. So I call that tech-splaining, and my job is to eliminate that. So by giving fellow technology salespeople the language or the tools to go ahead and tell those stories.
Right, that's fascinating. The fact that both Rahim and I recognized all the technologies that you mentioned shows that we're all about the same age. We're all about the same age.
As he did not mention about the DOS before the.
Well, I remember that was before I started. I remember you loaded DOS before you loaded Windows. So I had all those disks and all that. And
big floppy.
I remember.
Precisely.
Yeah. So Rahim, what have you got for Doug?
Yeah, I'm very keen to learn more about this storytelling because, of course, I came from the same background as well. I'm a civil engineer, but of course, I get into the IT technology, right? So now I have a consulting firm. In fact, tomorrow, right, I'm going to actually present my case to one of the potential investors. So again, how to actually turn the technology, right, into stories to attract people, right? So back to your story, right? Storytelling lines, right? So how do you structure first? I think for the sake of everybody, right? how do you structure the story so that it become very interesting to the audience, especially if I want to present something very techy, right?
Yeah. It varies by audience, but the process for me is very much the same. And in reality, I probably have about a dozen stories that I use, and I sort of spin them different ways for different needs or different audience. That way, it's easier to remember. I do add and augment type things and all that. And like I said, I'm a little bit like, I call myself like a bee. I collect pollen from everybody else that I meet, and it makes my stories better or more meaningful, or I can take a little different aspect of it. A lot of the stories I tell are actually a conglomeration or an aggregation of a bunch of different situations I've been in. So it's not that they're not true. It's just, everybody on an IT journey, as you guys are both aware, are not on the same place. No two companies are exactly the same place in their journey, especially with digital transformation. So sometimes I'll do this story of telling, here's customer A, here's customer B, but I make it just saying I had a customer, which is true. So the stories have basis in truth. But back to your point is, I call this starting the story with where with where the listener or the audience lives. So when you're telling a story that especially if it requires some change and discomfort, and anytime you have change, it's discomfort. You have to start with where they're familiar with their surroundings. What are their current business like? What are the climate? What are these other things? What are their personal interests? So I do a lot of LinkedIn stalking to go on to find out, okay, how are they posting? What are they sharing? Where are their minds at? And it's just simply a technique to make that connection with them and starting the story there. Because if you do that, I found that most people will come along with you on the journey, even if it's sort of rocky and a little scary. But if you don't close that chasm, if you don't start it with what's important to them, ideally what you should be is focus on that. You want them to come out of this thinking that there was value in what you did because you helped them start on a journey to solve their problem or make their life better. I think it sort of gets back to my main purpose in life is to make every interaction where we're both better off for doing that. So in your case there, what is the investor looking for? What is their what are they funding in the past? What are they is there a mission statement? Is there something on that? And how can you tie what you're doing into that? Right. Rather than trying to, because it's sort of funny. I work in the education and local government sector here. And even though I found over the years, even though that the things that somebody would do in an educational environment, infrastructure and stuff like that is exactly the same as a Fortune 500 company, it's called differently. So you have to use the words that they use. You have to use the experiences that they have to make that connection, because one, they usually don't have the time to do it themselves, or two, they don't have the tools to do it themselves. They don't understand. They can't make that. It's sort of like if you threw me into some place where just a bunch of French speaking people, I would be lost. I don't speak French. And it was just sort of like, there's a chasm there. I need a guide. I need somebody, a translator, to help me cross that. And so that would be my advice. And that's my advice of everything. If I look at an audience, if I'm giving a presentation or something, what is their experience? What is the other, even if it's something about the location that you're talking about. For example, I went to Singapore on one of my Microsoft trips, and I think it was sort of, let's see if we can harass the American, because they gave me this durian custard, which, it tasted good going down, but like 3 hours later, I was tasting it for like 2 weeks, and they got a good lick out of it. So I think your audience can probably relate to that.
Yeah. I mean, some of us taste it after years, so
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from. But that's fascinating that you say you have some archetypes, right? You have some stories that can be rehashed and repurposed. That's fantastic, and I like that you mentioned that you need translators. And I've gone out of the tech space. I work in HR now, but I find that most of my work is really as a translator, because I need to speak to the top management, and they speak business speak, and I need to translate that to what the people understand. And when we want to implement any cultural improvements, we need to translate that into business speak again, so that the top management understands what we're trying to do. So I guess in tech, it's almost the same thing. You need to translate those ones and zeros into something that's more emotionally, resonates with the people who are making the decisions. So back to Rahim's question about how do you structure? Are there like typical story structures that you can use, and there's a certain way you tell your story?
I will try to make the customer or the listener the hero of the journey. And it's try to help them envision themselves along in the journey. So I'll use techniques like, if we in 3 weeks, if we're doing this, this is what your life would look like. You told me you're currently spending all your time patching systems and you just don't know where they're at. You're constantly feeling behind. Well, in 3 weeks, using our technology, here's what other customers have done, other customers in your industry. So I try to make it very easy for them to see themselves in that role of which I'm trying to do, to understand what their life will be. And again, if I can see some hope at the end of the runway, or like I said, if you would have said, envision yourself in 2 years, you're running not only one of these places, but 3 of these places in different places. Because here's an example of somebody that did just that. It's giving you some hope. It's giving you some other things. So I think that's the way I would structure it to get the buy-in and all that. Sometimes it's a discovery. Sometimes when I'm talking to customers, it's getting that intel that I need for the very next meeting to have. And I play this little game with myself. My goal is to have the person I'm talking with talk more than I am, because it doesn't really matter what I have to say. I'm going to ask questions. I want to sort of dig in a little bit further. And I'm a bit of a polymath in that I have a lot of different interests, and I collect sort of stories. So like I can talk to people about golf, about, behind me, there's triathlons, which have generated some other questions and stuff. So if you sort of have experiences or knowledge of a bunch of different areas that you can make that connection, and sometimes use an analogy from that thing, is very helpful. So asking those questions, trying to get that intel and stuff for the next meeting, so that when you come back, then you can construct that story. So it's really hard from a cold call, if you don't do any research, to tell an impactful story, because you may tell it one way and it's totally off. It's not what they need. Right. So that it's sort of like picking up an article that's irrelevant to what your problems are of the day.
Just
Right.
now you mentioned about sorry, Ade.
Go
You
ahead.
mentioned 12. 12. Is that, or are they the format that you have a standard kind of categories that you want to tell if you are facing different types of audience? Was that?
Yeah, I mean, I try to get sort of in their world. Like the story I would tell a CEO is going to be different than the story I tell a marketing officer, or somebody that I would tell a security officer. So the stories are all, even though I might be playing off the same core, where their character fits in that story is a little bit different, and the outcome that they get out of it will be different. If you look at like the Harry Potter series and stuff, so you had the 3 primary characters were in that story, but then if you want to talk about Neville or some of these other things, what did they get out of it and grow? So there's subplots that go around. Tom Clancy was really good about, when he would write a novel, about having 3 or 4 different storylines going on at the same time. And it wasn't till the end where you saw that intersection. So my goal is to sort of do the same thing. Is I'm talking to a company and I'm talking to different people at different levels. I like to say I can tell a story from the janitor to the CEO. How do I sort of navigate that and use the appropriate language experience, but still we're working to get to this North Star somewhere at the end of the day. We're all sort of in this journey together, and eventually the pieces fall in together.
Right.
Well,
There's a comment here from my basketball buddy. So he says, yeah, it's like me and him. And when we talk basketball talk, right? And if somebody is not into that, they probably couldn't understand anything we're saying. It's like we're speaking a different language. So
Exactly.
I think, yeah. So it's very important to try and understand your audience, or the person you're speaking with, and speak to them at their level. I guess that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and so, so in my previous role back at Microsoft, we did some international travel. As I said, I've been to Singapore before, and I didn't ever make it to Malaysia, but I went to Japan and went to Taiwan. And working through a translator is even a bigger challenge. And the humor doesn't always, because I like a lot of humor, and the humor doesn't always doesn't translate well. So which of those are challenged? How do you again craft the story there. If you're relying on humor, how do you craft things that aren't necessarily? How do you take that out of it? And you have to practice and sort of have to have a plan to sort of pull back to make it very succinct.
Right. Very interesting. So, do you find yourself speaking more about just plain storytelling or more on telling tech stories or explaining tech? Which one are you more into right now?
Well, I do the tech thing every day, but I find, for example, it's storytelling in general. My audience tends to be somewhat technically minded because that's where my experience relies and stuff. For example, I was a mentor out at the University of Texas here, McCombs Business School for the MBA, or it's actually a master's in ITSM, some different technology. We had AI, we had data scientists and stuff, and I would go speak to the students that were in that class because I would listen to them talk to each other, and there was very much tech explaining going on. They were talking about this algorithm or this other thing and all the other things, and I said, okay, why is that important? Well, it's this much, and they would simply go back to the tech explaining, or you would ask them a fundamental question of why should I hire you? I could hire anybody from this class and not get fired because you're all brilliant, you're all smart, but why should I hire you? And then start reading their resume into that. No, really. I mean, so they lack the ability, and we don't teach us anywhere about how do if I can't tell a story of myself, what's unique about me, what how I am adding value and stuff, then it's really hard. And that's what led me to the TED Talk, but it's really hard to build other stories from that. Cause that's like, if you look at the progression, this is like a baseline learning. If you can't sell yourself, if you can't sell your vision and why you're unique, then you're starting from, it's going to be really hard to do a higher level stories.
Right. But unfortunately, kids aren't taught that anywhere. They're not taught that in school, in high school, in university, nowhere. So how did you pick this up? Where did you learn how to craft your story and how to present it?
I had some good mentors along the way that sort of, asked me the why should I hire you question. I do a lot of reading and stuff. I watch a lot of TED Talks. I actually watch a lot of comedians because the timing that they have and their ability to tell us sort of an abstract story that everybody can understand is phenomenal to do that. So, but it's as I went along in a Microsoft, we had the, annual reviews and stuff. And this was something I was uncomfortable with. Is I had to tell my story. What was the value that I added at the time? Because I was, came from the place where, hey, my work will be noticed and going. But there's 140,000 people. There's no way that everybody can notice what what I'm doing. So how do I learn to craft that story of the value that I added to these other things? So some of it was I was put in this place, and it's things that happen in life for a reason. You get put in these challenging situations for a reason, is to prepare you for another situation. So having a positive mindset of, okay, what can I learn about this? Makes me very uncomfortable. I don't like it. I don't like talking about myself. And I still struggle with that sometimes. I have some friends, Tima Elhaj, who's on LinkedIn a lot, and she constantly tells me that, she's my biggest coach or friend, and telling me I got a lot more value because sometimes that inner bully in myself says, look, you're just another bald-headed guy here that talks funny. So it's, it's really hard. So you have to sort of focus on, on telling your story and then working out the mechanics from there. So it's just sort of, I was put in a place where I had to learn it.
Yeah. Sometimes that's necessity. Yeah. Necessity is what pushes you there. Do you tell stories at your work, Rahim? I mean, you just mentioned that you're presenting to investors. I guess that's an ideal opportunity to tell a story to them.
I will have a presentation tomorrow at 11. So I guess probably I pick up some pointers here, and that's why I'm I'm trying to actually leverage tonight's event to pick some brain, especially from down. And, yeah, of course, every day we talk about something. It's just like in your TEDx. I was intrigued to learn some of the techniques there. When people are more intrigued to listen to the story rather than numbers, right? And you mentioned about between Johnny and also what's the other relevant person that you relate there in the TEDx, and you mentioned about some of these numbers, and then people always remember about the story rather than the numbers. Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
very good, yeah.
Yeah, I started that out. It came out of some brain science that I did when I was doing some research. Lisa Cron wrote a book about wired for stories. Our brains are wired to learn from stories, and I used the example. I gave a date. It was the number at the first of the TED Talk, and then I got into some stories, and it was about. It would relate to the date, but yeah, we see numbers and stuff. But in your case, there, I mean, eventually, if they're investors, they want to see numbers. So, I would start off with, here's the vision, here's what this is going to do, and then here's the numbers that back that up, right? So you've sold them on the vision at that point in time, and then you can get to the numbers of here that is, and here's why I'm saying that. And you can tell stories of why the numbers map to what the story you just told them. But then that says, yeah, that's a product I need to have, or that's a service I want to invest in because I can see that Raheem has done the work, and he's got this process in place that will really make the customers' lives better. So there's a big market opportunity and stuff on that. So it's got its place. Numbers are in there, but at the end of the day, they really won't care about the numbers as much as the story, and you have the numbers as a backup to do it. So
Yeah,
that would be
investing on the surface seems like a very technical pursuit, but really, when you invest in a company, you invest in the people. So they want to relate to you, Rahim, and they want to believe in you. And believe it or not, they want you to win. So if you give them the opportunity to help you win, then you'll have a better chance of getting them to help you. So good luck on that tomorrow.
Yeah, I think probably I can use some of the tips given. So probably I tweak a bit in terms of the approach because now I know exactly start with the vision, the numbers, and then how to achieve numbers, and then of course based on those information, I can actually translate that into a storyline. Yeah?
Right.
I will try that tomorrow. I will try that tomorrow.
cool.
Great. You know what, Doug? One of the most questions I get on LinkedIn is about TEDx, which is why I put it in my headline because I've spoken at two TEDx, and as have you. So how was that experience for you? I mean, I'm sure you've spoken on numerous stages, but speaking at a TEDx event, what was that like?
Scared the crap out of me. As you mentioned, I've spoken for 20 in front of thousands of people and stuff on that, and when people would tell me they're scared to get up on stage, I'm like, yeah, please, it's easy, just get up there and talk. And then I got into this, and it was like, wow, this is a whole different level of stuff that I'm putting on myself, and part of it was the way it was structured in that, you have to stay in that 6-foot circle. That they've got lightings and I'm a bit of I like getting out in front of the audience, and I'll use the entire stage to sort of make those connections with people in the audience. So that, to me, that was, I was a little limited. It felt very strange from that standpoint. And then it was you don't want to use a lot of the slides that come into play there. And I've watched different ones, and you want the attention to be on you, not on the slides. So I only use 3 slides. And I usually use more when I use slides that there's not a lot of words on them. Typically they're pictures, and I'll use them as a pivot or a reminder of where I'm going next. And I had to do it, and I had to do it the same way twice. Now that was probably the most challenging thing for me because we had a dress rehearsal they were filming, and then they filmed so I had to wear the same clothes, everything on that, and they were going to sort of edit it together. And in the TED Talk, they if you know where to look, they did actually, you can see where they spliced a couple things together. They did a great job editing, which I'm glad they did. But as I'm going through it, that's the biggest challenge because I never tell, if you looked at any of my talks, even if it was on the same subject, they're all different because I try to personalize it for the audience that's there, even if it's some topical news of the day that comes. So that was a challenge in doing that. But the getting accepted was one thing. Here's the story. Here's these other things, and then the realization that holy crap, now I've got to do this, and it's going to live on the internet forever. That was scary. I mean, it was a totally different mindset for me to go do that. So focusing on the one thing that you have, the story that you want to do, and then writing it from there. And then then the brevity of it, that was another challenge. The very first script that I wrote, the talk was 36 minutes, and I had to do it in 12.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you lost, it's like okay, I don't like that child today. I don't like, it's like it was almost like parsing children because there was a lot of color and texture I added to it, and that was a different experience. So I would approach it totally different the next time I do one. From the just maybe simplified a little bit. But I learned a lot in doing the research about brain science and other things that actually made me a better storyteller. But it also about the inner bully that we all have that tells us we're not good enough or we can't do that, or it prevents a lot of people from change. Because I had that. I fought that thing up until like months. Even the minute before I went on stage, I was fighting that you stink, you shouldn't be here. And how do you deal with that? Because we all have that. And as I talk to people about about speaking or about storytelling, I'm terrible at it. Well, no, stop. That's the inner bully in you telling you. It's your subconscious doing what it's supposed to do, trying to protect you. But nobody's died ever being on stage. Nobody's, I use that in the line. Nobody's ever died. The worst thing that happens, people laugh at you. Well, good. Then I've made their lives better. They come on with that.
That's right. Quick shout out to Hilmi Satar, all the way from Sri Lanka. It gives me a kick to see people tuning in from all over the world. I mean, it just blows my mind that I'm here in my home and you're in Austin, and and Hilmi is in Sri Lanka, and we're all having this conversation. So, to the audience, if you have any questions at all, please do put them in the chat, and I'll air it here. Just like this question from Ashraf, my basketball buddy again. Says he understands you on the text-plaining stuff, storytelling, but besides figures and happy endings, is there any special character you use in your storytelling pitch?
I've used some different ones. So if I'm trying to, you guys have probably talked to people about digital transformation, which has different meanings to different people. And typically, and you have to find the right person to tell this one to. And it's the challenger. It's the person that's sort of going against it's going to be hard. It's got to, especially when you're talking to an executive, you're in the transformation. It's not usually a failure of technology. It's a failure of changing the organizations to take advantage of the technology. So you have to talk about organization. So it's not always a happy ending. Sometimes I will leave it with this is what can happen if you don't do anything, because sometimes that's not doing anything is a choice as well, and trying to paint that picture to encourage them to change. Yeah, it seems like a monumental task to overcome, and it's going to be hard. But at the end of the day, there's hope. Okay, maybe it's not a happy ending, but there is hope at the end. And it's part two. It's sort of like a trilogy of Star Wars movies or something like that, right? You can end on a questionable note. It's not down. It's sort of an uplifting note. But there's no special characters that I use. If it was a special character, it would try to be having that person that I'm talking to, or those people I'm talking to, envision them being the heroes in this journey. So I'm just trying to have them associate that, and I use words that they use, or that they can picture themselves there.
Yeah. So you've mentioned hero's journey a couple of times. Is that a archetypical storyline that's always used in many different cultures?
Yeah, I mean, it's used in movies. It's used in everything. You have the hero's journey where if there's a book, several books that came on, but you meet the protagonist or the hero, early on, and things are fine. Then something bad happens, and then they start fighting. It's like a wrestling match here in U.S. Something bad happens, and they overcome that. Then something else bad happens. If you ever watched The Pursuit of Happiness, it had Will Smith in it. Yeah. Well, that had more downs, and I was like, holy cow, I'm depressed. Until the end, he made overcome. So you have to overcome this, and the hero has to overcome these challenges themselves to work. They can't have help from somebody else. They have to overcome it themselves to really make us connect with that. That's the thing. If they had help from other people, then okay. But if they've overcome all that themselves, then that really, I can empathize with that. I can use that as inspiration to go do things on that. So the journey is sort of the arc that you have behind it. I have this thing on LinkedIn I did about a year or so ago called the 7 Steps of a Story, and I sort of go through how do you get to each part and what they mean.
Cool. All right. Do you have any? Go ahead.
it also depends on the audience.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
losing. Yeah, we're losing Rahim again.
Am I
There you
back?
Yep, you're back.
I'm here again.
Yeah,
Right.
repeat your question.
What I'm saying, when yeah, okay. What I'm saying is that it depends on the type of audience that you're presenting. For example, like I always have these logos, ethos, and pathos type of people, right? Logos are people who rely a lot on facts. Ethos, based on experience, and then pathos,
Mhm.
somebody with patience, with emotion. So if let's say accountant, right, they are looking at just numbers. So how do you want to apply the story telling kind of method to people who actually really look at the numbers alone? They don't care about your grandmother's story or whatever. They just want to look at the end, what is the number? How do you
Yeah,
actually?
yeah. It's sort of when I talk to those people, and those are about people about the most foreign to me. I mean, that's like the opposite of what I am. But numbers can tell a story too, and it's knowing what they're looking for when you have the numbers. What are they looking for? Growth? Are they looking for a reduction in cost? Or I mean, what are they actually looking for? And then you show how those numbers over time. Because I was talking to somebody that was a painter, the data scientist. She was a painter, and she was struggling trying to say what here's the value of data, the algorithm, and things like that. I said, look, you're a data scientist. Data, a painting, if you digitizing it, is just a bunch of numbers or pixels that change colors, right? So how can you leverage that? What is this story? What is this painting? These numbers? Is this a company that's growing? Is this a product that's got untapped potential, or is this a product that's sort of like the end of life and we need to think about doing something different? So you can tailor your story to what those numbers are actually telling you to do that. And the language you use, you have to sort of tailor to that. But they'll see the numbers, but as you're going through it, you're telling the story behind it to attack to that other piece of that, because they'll make that connection even if they like numbers, reading, and these other things. You got to help them form that story in their mind of what the numbers are telling them.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is, again, knowing, stalking, and knowing what your audience is. Again, the way they like to receive information. There was a color wheel where I was like orange, and my boss was like the opposite color, where he wanted a ton of data to get through. I've been around business long enough to know that, yeah, okay, we have about a 90% chance of closing this deal. Well, he wanted 90 pages of data that backed that up. And that was always a struggle for me to sort of think the opposite way. Okay, what numbers can I use that back up my assumption? Because sometimes it's a gut feeling. We've been around and known enough. You have that gut feeling. You've been in this situation enough that this is what it's going to be. But now you have to go show your work. Back in elementary, I could get an answer to a multiplication problem in my head, but I have to go show the work, right? So this is those people that like the numbers. You're showing your work to that.
Hmm.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think, because we're talking to human beings, right? And human beings are emotional creatures. However, they say that they just want to see the numbers, they're still somebody's son or somebody's father and somebody's husband.
Mhm.
And if you can get to their emotions, that's where you can really, get to the real person behind that facade who says he only wants numbers. That may be a persona that they want to put across to you, but in actual fact, behind all of those, the guy that says he just wants numbers is really a human being who has feelings and who has emotions, and is not really that rational. Human beings are not rational creatures, right? We're very emotional creatures. So
Yeah,
if you can touch those emotions, you'll be, I would imagine, rather more successful.
yeah,
Uh,
that's a great point in that with the family. Most of us have families we all have families. Some of them are more dysfunctional than others. But in relating to the numbers, ask them, when did you, if you've got something where it's taking a risk on this to do this, okay, when did you make an investment at home, be it a car, be it a house, be it whatever when did you make an investment like that? And what did you use to sort of make that decision? How did it turn out? and very much the same. Like Asifa said, we're emotional. We buy from emotion at the end of the day, not logic, not these other. Because we may say we buy logic, but at the end of the day, the logic ties into an emotion. I feel safe making this decision based off these numbers. So the emotion there is safety, and then sort of tapping into that. That's a great insight there, Asif.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, if you do have any questions for Doug Thompson, this is the time for you to drop your questions right here in the chat, and I'll address it with him. Doug, at this point in time, we play a little game of which I didn't tell you about. It's called Would You Rather. So I'm going to give you two choices, and we'll see which you would rather do. And since this is a tech edition, we'll have some nerdy techie questions for you to tackle. First one being, would you rather lose $1,000 or all of the contacts in your phone?
I'd say all the contacts in my phone, because I know how to restore them.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. Good answer. Would you rather not have internet access or be a successful stand-up comedian? Because I know you like to watch stand-up comedy.
Oh, I would say not have internet access. I'd the comedian, please. That's sort of I'm a closet comedian.
You would give up the internet to be a stand-up comedian, a successful stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I think so. Well, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So internet is messed up, and you can only choose one thing to access. So would you rather only have access to YouTube or Reddit?
What's my bandwidth? So I mean, the videos copy or the it's a nerd question. Assuming that the videos play at full speed, I would get YouTube, because I like watching some of the TEDs and the other things like that. The Reddit is like any of you lack some texture. You don't necessarily get. I mean, sometimes it's information overload.
YouTube has changed over the last few years, hasn't it? I mean, It's been a lot more than just cat videos and Justin Bieber, and a lot more knowledge you can get really from YouTube, and that's only happened in the past, I think, 3 years, maybe 2 or 3 years, and it's really exploded since COVID, because more and more people are putting really good content for free on YouTube, and you can really access a lot of cool stuff. So that's a good answer. Last question: would you rather eat the same food every day for the rest of your life, or never have internet again?
Is it food durian? Do I have
Could be.
I probably have 4 or 5 different foods that I eat anyway, so I need the internet type thing, and I'd eat the same thing every day, as long as it wasn't durian, because that's just painful.
I could probably live on durian. I love it. So thank you for playing that little game for us. So Rahim, back to you.
Right. Okay. Still about this storytelling, right? How do you? Okay, I want to relate this into this social media, especially like LinkedIn, right? Very interesting, because you don't know, because sometimes you thought that the story was good, but end up there's no response or very minimal. But sometimes you unexpectedly receive a very high likes or viewers from unexpected kind of story. So how do you choose a story that really intrigue people to like and views your story?
I've posted things I thought this is going to kill it, this is going to go viral, and it was like crickets. There's some unknown math in the background about timing and some other stuff which impacts it, some other things. Again, getting back to the fundamental thing, if I can get one person that comments or does something that I can see that they've truly done, then I'm fine with it, because I put that out there, and it is me. I always put out stuff that's me. I don't put stuff out there for the likes and views and stuff like that. I try to help somebody. I try to tell a story. I did a whole series on when I was building my patio and trying to relate it to events, in your life or business or different things like that. So for me, I don't worry about those vanity metrics as much. Of course, it'd be great if it did. But it's too often it's, I get these people all the time saying, hey, we'll get you 1 million listeners to your podcast. Well, I'd rather people that listen to my podcast actually do it because they like what I'm saying, rather than simply getting these bots or what have you, giving me artificial numbers, because I don't live by that.
I guess Aziz probably have better experience than me, then because he posted every day, I think. Are you still, right, Aziz?
I do try and post every day. I think it makes a difference when both with the audience and this almighty algorithm that changes every day. We don't know what goes up, but by posting more regularly, I mean, it doesn't have to be every day. I guess it must be predictable for your audience to know when to expect something from you, and they can look forward to it, and that helps. But I totally get it, Rahim, that sometimes that you just don't know how it works. Just throw something out there and you get 100,000 views, and you spend all these hours crafting a beautiful story and nobody reads it. So
probably have to take it like Doc mentioned about you actually the most is the message that you want to give to the public, right? So whether numbers is not important. Make sure that the content is meaningful and good for the audience.
Yeah. And another thing I'd like to add is that the permanency of the internet, like Doug was saying, this is going to be, my speech is going to be on the internet, it's going to be there forever. So whatever you post really is going to be permanent, regardless if you delete it or not. It's going to be in somebody's server and somebody took a screenshot. But whatever you post is going to add to your, your portfolio. And the real opportunity we have today on social media, on LinkedIn or Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, you have the power of a broadcast company that used to be only in the hands of the most powerful companies in the world just a few years ago. But today, Doug's podcast can reach globally, as can this show. And it's always going to be there, right? It's always going to be part of Rahim's portfolio and Doug's portfolio and my portfolio that we had this conversation today. And I think that's mind-blowing and incredibly interesting that my children and my grandchildren can one day Google it, or it may be called something else at that time, but find their grandfather talking to Doug's grandchildren's grandfather and Ryan's grandchildren's grandfather, and our granddads were talking on that day. So it's totally amazing. So it doesn't matter, like Doug said, if 1 person, 5 people, 10 people tune in or read it right now, it will have a long tail and it will last, hopefully forever. So
I totally agree. As it goes, saying, don't put anything out there that you'll be ashamed of.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I speak to a lot of kids in universities, and that's one of the main things I tell them. You think it's cool to put that picture of you smashed drunk right now, but it's not going to be cool in a few years when you're looking for a job, or somebody does a background check on you. So
exactly. You gotta be careful with these things.
Exactly, you have to be careful. So Doug, I have had a massively fascinating conversation with you, and Rahim has been taking notes. He's meeting his investors tomorrow. We really appreciate what you've shared with us. So how would you wrap up our conversation tonight, or this morning for you? What were kind of the key takeaways you've had from our now it's been 50 minutes that we've been chatting tonight? What's standing out in your mind about what the conversations we've been having today? He's lost. Doug may not be able to hear us. Can you try and say something, Doug? No, you can't say anything. Technology again.
Can see the face on the video.
Yeah, so I think we're losing audio here, Doug. So anyway, I hope the audience can still hear us. You can still hear me, right, Rahim?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm good.
it looks like you and me, Rahim, closing off this show. Unfortunately for Doug, his audio just dropped out. We'd like to thank everybody who is on the show tonight for the great questions and the great views you've had. It was an amazing show with Doug Thompson. He's still with us in the studio, but unfortunately we can't hear him, or he can't hear us. But we'd like to thank him. Please join me in thanking him. If you haven't followed him on LinkedIn, please do. Doug Thompson. He also has a podcast called the Doug Thompson Podcast. So easily find that on Spotify or Apple Pod, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find Doug Thompson, Google him, and he's definitely worthwhile to follow on LinkedIn. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Rahim, for helping me co-host the show tonight.
Thank
And
you.
again, everyone, please join me in thanking Doug Thompson for this wonderful event we had tonight. So with that, I think he's back. So let's give him a chance to say goodbye to everyone. Hey, Doug, are you back? Nope. He still can't hear us. We still can't hear him. So just wave, Doug. Wave. All right. Good night, everyone. Take care. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Good night.
All right, good. See you
Bye.
again next week. Yeah.
Yep. Next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye. Stay kind.